When politicians talk about tariffs, they often wrap them in patriotic language, calling them tools to defend American jobs, industries, and national strength. The narrative is simple. Slap a tax on foreign goods, make imports more expensive, and consumers will turn to American-made products. Sounds like a win for the U.S. economy, right? But here's the problem. This logic is seductive and deeply flawed. In reality, tariffs don't make Americans wealthier. They don't even protect the economy in the long run. Instead, they raise prices, shrink consumer choice, hurt American exporters, and drag down the very industries they claim to support. Let's unpack why. Tariffs are taxes. Specifically, they are taxes placed on imported goods. So, when the government imposes a tariff on, let's say, foreign steel or electronics, it doesn't mean the foreign company pays that fee. It means the cost is passed along to the American importer, to the retailer, and ultimately to you, the consumer. From the perspective of basic supply and demand, this has predictable results. Tariffs shift the supply curve leftward, meaning fewer goods are available at every price point. As supply drops, prices rise. Consumers pay more for everything, not just the imported product, but also for domestic alternatives that can now raise prices without facing the same level of competition. And this isn't just theory. Numerous studies confirm that consumers, not foreign companies, bear most of the burden. A 2021 analysis by J.P. Morgan estimated that tariffs imposed during the Trump administration cost the average American household roughly $1,200 per year in higher prices. Think about that. That's not money going to American workers. That's money lost in a policy-induced price hike. Now, proponents of tariffs argue that they protect jobs, especially in manufacturing and heavy industry. But here's the inconvenient truth. Tariffs might help a narrow slice of workers in a specific sector, but they do more damage across the broader economy. For example, if you impose tariffs on imported steel to protect domestic steelmakers, American car manufacturers, construction companies, and appliance makers, all of whom rely on steel, now face higher input costs. That makes them less competitive both at home and abroad. As a result, some jobs may be preserved in steel production, but even more jobs could be lost in steel-using industries. In fact, an analysis by the Peterson Institute for International Economics found that during the Bush-era steel tariffs in 2002, for every one job saved in the steel industry, 16 jobs were lost in steel-using industries. That's not job protection. That's economic sabotage. And tariffs don't happen in a vacuum. Other countries respond. When the U.S. imposes tariffs, its trade partners often retaliate, imposing their own tariffs on American goods. We saw this play out during the U.S.-China trade war. China responded to U.S. tariffs with duties on American agricultural products, targeting farmers and rural communities. Soybean exports collapsed. American farmers lost billions. And yes, the federal government had to step in with subsidies that came directly from taxpayers. So, the cycle goes like this. First, the government taxes imports. Then, consumers pay more. Next, foreign markets close off. Then, exporters lose sales. And finally, taxpayers fund bailouts. It's a lose-lose scenario dressed up as tough trade policy. One of the most misguided ideas floating around is the notion of reciprocal tariffs. The idea is simple. If another country taxes any goods at 25%, we should tax those at 25% in return. But trade isn't a zero-sum game. The goal of trade isn't to punish others. It's to benefit your own economy. If another country is foolish enough to tax their consumers more, that's their loss. Matching their mistake with our own just doubles the damage. Think of it this way. If your neighbor decides to burn their crops, do you respond by burning yours too? Of course not. That only compounds the harm. Reciprocal tariffs may sound fair, but they ignore the reality that imports help Americans by lowering costs, increasing choice, and improving quality through competition. Supporters of tariffs often say they're necessary to bring countries like China to the negotiating table. But there's little evidence that this works in practice. China didn't back down during the trade war. It didn't reform its state-owned enterprises or intellectual property policies under pressure. Instead, it found new markets while American farmers and exporters paid the price. Tariffs may feel like a bold geopolitical move, but in the end, they tend to achieve little and hurt domestic producers far more than foreign ones. As the Cato Institute points out, tariffs rarely achieve their stated objectives. They are blunt instruments trying to solve complex international problems. There's a deeper issue at play here too: innovation. Open trade fosters innovation. It allows companies to specialize, scale, and access the best technologies and inputs the world has to offer. Tariffs, on the other hand, insulate domestic firms from competition, reducing their incentive to innovate, adapt, and improve. In the short term, this might seem like protection. In the long term, it breeds complacency. And in a 21st century global economy, complacency is fatal. The most dynamic economies are those that embrace competition, not fear it. So, why won't tariffs make Americans wealthier? Because they're taxes on consumption, because they reduce purchasing power, because they destroy more jobs than they protect, because they invite retaliation, because they weaken the competitive edge of American businesses, and because they fail to deliver on their promises. True wealth creation doesn't come from insulating ourselves from the world. It comes from engaging with it, from trading freely, from innovating boldly, and from trusting that the American worker can compete, not by hiding behind tariffs, but by leading on value, quality, and ingenuity. Tariffs don't make us richer. They make everything and everyone more expensive. If America wants to be stronger, it needs smart policies rooted in economic reality, not myths. So the next time someone tells you tariffs are the key to prosperity, ask them this: if taxing Americans more made us richer, wouldn't we already be wealthy beyond imagination?